Hello, everybody. My name is Nikki, and welcome to the session where we'll be discussing about how bereavement care is maternity care. They are one and the same, inextricably linked, and why there needs to be a bigger focus on this within our maternity system. I'm joined today by Hazel. She wants to say a quick hello.
Hello, hi, my name's Hazel Leonard. I am a midwife and fertility educator. So yes, this is a very important subject for me. I've been a midwife for 16 years, and it's something that from day one. I remember even as a student midwife being on labour ward, and it's something that is always there and it's a
Mhm.
priority. And it's not something that we should ignore and, pretend that it doesn't happen because it matters and those babies matter and the family matters. So yeah, I feel very kind of passionate and strongly about this topic.
Which is why you're the best person, one of the best people to come and talk through this with me, because we're very similar midwife wise in like what we're passionate
Mm.
about. And it's also good because you, like me, trained in the UK, and that was kind of just integral in our daily practice. Whereas when you work here, it isn't the same approach. Um,
Can I
like you
ask,
said, that
as a bereavement doula, I'm not a midwife, but so obviously both of you have trained in the UK. Can I ask
Mm.
what does training for bereavement support look like in both of the degrees that I assume you both studied at different places in the UK?
Yeah.
But what did
Mhm.
that look like in terms of, was it a module? Was it woven in? At what stage in your education was it introduced?
Uh,
Do you want to go
I mean,
first,
I can
Hazel?
speak from mine. Yeah, there's a full module on it. It was, I believe, if I remember rightly, I'll say 16 years ago, so it make me feel old, but in university, within each term, there was three separate modules that we would focus on. And there was a full module for bereavement care. But also you were encouraged practically to be part of that process. So you, if you're in an antenatal clinic and there is I say one of your patients, they're not sick, but let's say for argument's sake, let's just say one of your women in your clinic and they have a loss, no matter what stage that is, you would be in touch with her. So the midwives that you were shadowing and you were working with, you kind of watch and learn in a way. You get the theoretical experience, but we have bereavement suites. We have fundraising for bereavement support. Even now, one of my colleagues, my previous colleagues back in the UK, is doing a bike ride to raise loss of baby awareness, to raise funds for their bereavement suite, to ensure that they've got everything in place. And then when I did come to the UAE, we had to put that together on our own. And I know that Lala, you've done some absolutely fantastic work here in the UAE with putting things in place to support those parents, um, from
Yeah,
a practical, yeah.
you raised a really interesting point there, that it is challenging here because Love Through Loss is a voluntary support community. We have a not-for-profit element, where based in the UK in terms of being able to purchase and deliver locally the memory boxes. We are the regional distributor for Cuddle Cot, etc. But we don't fundraise. We can't fundraise. That's not in our legal remit. And so it isn't easy because there is, I think you would both agree, we have seen fairly universally real barriers to getting things like memory boxes in place and cuddle cots and things that cost that take an investment. Whereas I think that in the UK and in other parts of the world where you can fundraise, a lot of those things are put in place in the hospital by parents who've been through that experience, I think. And we've had a little bit of that's happened. So families overseas have fundraised for a cuddle cot that they have then delivered to here that we've been able to gift into a hospital, but it is a trickier one given the legalities of it, and it is hard, I think, to get many hospitals to do that investment. To those that we do have, we're incredibly grateful that they really understand the importance of that investment.
I think another complication there is Dubai is such a melting pot. So where, you know, my experience as a student was similar to Hazel's. That's quite normal in the UK, in Australia, kind of European countries. It's usually like a core module. And then I was lucky. I worked in the NHS. I worked at St Mary's with. They have a Tommy's Centre, so it's like Dr. Hazel. It's the bereavement team there was just so incredibly strong. So I had a lot to learn from. But not everybody's midwifery training or nurse training, whatever they've come over as, includes that. So their exposure can be minimal sometimes. And if you don't have the education provided when you're a student or when you are newly qualified and you're kind of getting exposure to all these things, then the problem is that they just don't know how to provide it, and it becomes, that's how things become taboo and they become scary. And it's a really hard part of the job, but it's such an essential part of the job.
Yeah. And like I completely agree with you culturally, you know, and it's a challenging one in the sense of, you know, in some countries it is, some cultures it's very much okay, this has happened, let's just move on. Okay, we don't need to focus on this anymore. I remember one really specific case of being on labour ward, supporting an American lady, and her mother was from this region. She was from the Middle East, and she wanted to spend time with her baby. She lost her baby at 26 weeks. So we did handprints, we did footprints, we took photos. She stayed with her little boy for as long as she wanted, and we kept them. She was like, I don't want them yet, but I just want, can you just keep hold of them? So we did that for her. And I remember, because I locked them in the drug cupboard because I knew they'd be safe in the drug cupboard. I was like, nobody will touch them, nobody will throw them away. And then I went on leave, and then I came back and she phoned and she's like, I'm just so upset that you threw them away. And I was, what? No, definitely we didn't throw them away. She's like, yeah, my mum came in to collect them and she was told that they'd been thrown away. So I went to the drug cupboard, unlocked the drug cupboard, still there, still sitting in there. And I went and I said, no, they're here. You can come and get them. And then she phoned back like half an hour later and she's like, I'm really sorry for accusing you of that. My mum didn't want me to have them because she thought it would make my grief worse. So my mum was trying to protect me from those pictures of my baby. And you have a mother that is trying to do what she thinks culturally is the best thing for her daughter. And then you have a daughter grieving in a very different way from her mother. And so even within a family, you get those cultural differences. But then when we're bringing healthcare professionals in that might have only ever been exposed to that way of thinking of, well, nobody wants this. Nobody wants to spend time with their baby. Why would we push for something that we don't want? This is just how people manage grief. Then that's a challenge for us as professionals, because you're not only managing expectations of families, but you're managing expectations of healthcare professionals and doctors and midwives and nurses, and that is very big challenge.
Yeah, there's a lot of plates spinning, isn't there? Because even if your provider doesn't believe that you should be seeing the baby, doing hands and footprints, it's that way of kind of, okay, let's just get on with it. You don't need to do that. And we do know, all the evidence tells us that people that did not get to see their baby, most of them regret it, and it becomes a very, very localized source of grief for them. And it's often very difficult for them to work through because we can't go back. Yeah. So and another thing I think is difficult here is making sure that families have a room that is not on a postnatal ward, not on a labour ward. They're on a different ward, but letting them have that time, because what happens, I
Strongly
find
still have midwifery care. I think that's something that,
they have to have midwifery care. The fact
Yeah.
that people don't have midwifery care is baffling, but I mean, that's another hill for another day. But making sure that we're not rushing them into these decisions, especially culturally, because culture is different for every person. Our beliefs are very different. Even the three of us now sitting here, we all will have varying beliefs. And people really try and get through that checklist that's on the guidelines to get everything done. And we don't need to do that in the first 12 hours. We need to give people time. We know the 7 stages of grief. We know that midwifery care for bereaved families stretches out a hell of a lot longer than the traditional kind of up to 10 days postpartum home visits. We're looking at a huge amount of time. And hospitals providing that, it should be fundamental.
And I think something that I would say in my experience of supporting families here as a bereavement doula is that actually, I think in spite of perhaps some of the expectations of different cultural norms around bereavement care, I've had families of, I think at last count, about 27 different nationalities that I've supported, and so many of them have all wanted universally to have something to remember their baby by, whether that is hand and footprints, and lots of families from the region, from other parts of the world where culturally it has not necessarily been the norm. And I'm very keen to make sure that we don't kind of stigmatize it just to being something that unique in the Middle East. Yes, we know that within Islam, the tradition and the culture is to bury very quickly. So sometimes that has provided a little bit of a barrier to memory making, because you don't have as much time to process, to heal from the immediacy of the aftermath of birth, right? Because let's face it, these women have just been through birth, whether that's been a cesarean birth, whether that's been a vaginal birth, whether that has been TFMR, whether that has been, early on in terms of a miscarriage. And there's so many different varieties of what that loss might look like, but each one of them is a fairly significant toll on a woman's body. And it is something that in and of itself, you need a
Are you still there, Hazel?
I'm still here. I'm sure she'll come back in a second. Okay.
I'll actually, I'll just touch on.
But yeah, like going on from what she's saying, the mixture of cultures and the desire to have a part of your baby, in whatever form that is universal. And I think we can agree on that. But then kind of leading on from that, it's our job as a healthcare professional to give these choices, and they should be choices for people to have. And having the knowledge and the tools available to us as well, because that's very challenging when you're in a hospital setting and you don't have the tools, or you have a 50 dirham budget and you have to buy some things that you can use. You don't have proper things for memory making and supporting those families. But giving parents and families a choice of their next steps has to be our role. We need to empower them to know that this is an option. And even I'm sure you've had the same, and Lala, you probably have the same. You might have had women that say, no, I don't want to, and then you give them time and you back off, because like you say, they've been through this incredibly difficult process of birth, and then they start to go, oh, well actually, can I? Yes, you can. And yes, we encourage it. And to have that education as professionals is invaluable for those families.
And sometimes I think good practice is to offer, like you say, we give them the choice, but we also say, do you want us to do hand and footprints? Like you say, you don't even have to see them. But with your consent, if we make these memories, you can come back at a different time and choose to take them. You might not choose it. Absolutely fine. Even things such as taking photographs on a trusted family member's phone. So it's not on their phone. It's not something that they will open their phone and see, but it's something that a trusted family member can hang on to if and when they are ready to see it. I think asking more than once has to be essential as well. Like if they, you know, sometimes people say, actually, I'd really love to see my baby. And that is definitely something. And there's a lot that can be done without spending money. And I always have, it's a bit of a like sticking point for me where private facilities generally don't have a budget for things like this, even for the training. Fine, I'm not a businesswoman, but they do have money for a valet or for a celebration for a public holiday in the hospital. It always kind of grates on me. I don't think something so heartbreaking should have to happen to a family for them to donate 10 memory boxes or to donate a cuddle cot. Like this should be built in to business framework, never mind anything else, because it's built into midwifery.
And it's not if you invest in it that it's going to happen. You know, it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah,
so investing
100%.
in it is not, ignoring that it happens doesn't make it go away, or doesn't, you know, I don't know if there's this mentality of, oh, those things don't happen with our hospital, with our care, and that's it will happen, and those families need these things, and it should, I agree, you know, it should be budgeted for.
That's this,
I'm like
isn't
say
it?
it's yeah.
Bereavement care is essential birth care because it's going to happen, and to sweep it under the rug and not to see those families, support those families, validate those families and those experiences is a travesty by our entire community of healthcare professionals, of the parents themselves, of course, but you know, it filters down, it really does. And I think it's so right that we have to incorporate this, and that is where obviously Love Through Loss, we are in the process of launching a really fantastic full-day training woven through with all our voices, our parent voices, the psychologists in the region, healthcare workers, to make it a fully multidisciplinary and collaborative project, because it's about empowering the staff who are supporting those families to do so with confidence and compassion, and helping those who are making the decisions about procurement of memory boxes, cuddle cots, understand why giving families a choice is so important, and why it's just so essential, because we will all be coming, you know, Dubai is the most beautifully blended community, and we will all come into bereavement with ideas about what that might look like. And almost none of us, I don't know a single family that's ever said to me, do you know what, we had a conversation before we moved here about what we do in the event of, you know, a family bereavement. No one, it's not a conversation we have. We're still not very good about talking about loss, and we don't want to think like that. But we then, it's those times where we kind of revert to what would be possibly the normal, familiar for us in our home country. And so one of the mothers we've had speak previously, Triona, who's a palliative care nurse from Ireland, it just didn't even occur to her that the hospital wouldn't have bereavement suites and a cuddle cot and memory boxes, because we're in a place that has such medical advancement and such wonderful private facilities and all of these things. And just as you said, Nikki, and I was about to call you Haley. Hazel, how long have I known you? This is why one of those days my brain is fried. But you know, this is why it is so important that we continue to have these conversations. We had a really good training and professional development yesterday. But one of the things that we have at Love Through Loss is we've got our little PDF flyer that we hope to have, anybody who's watching this, on the desk of every IVF clinic, every fertility, every fetal medicine, every maternity ward, NICU, etc., with the QR codes to the UAE peer support communities. We know peer support is an incredibly evidence-based way to help support families emotionally through any experience, any process. And again, there was a concern of, but you know, should we have these things in those areas, because aren't they going to create fear? And I think that speaks to that thing of that worry that if we talk about baby loss, are we going to kind of manifest it? Is it going to be catching? Is it going to make, you know, stress for people having a healthy pregnancy? And I think my take on this, and I'd be very interested to get yours, is that we have to have these things visible and around, and so that they become household names, so that people know exactly where to access support in an instant if they need to, because the one thing about bereavement is we don't have a lot of time. So it's heartbreaking when we hear families afterwards go, I wish I'd known about this. I wish I could have had those options. I wish someone had told me. So I think it's something that is really, it's so important that we do have that visibility. And it also is the thing that stops our families from feeling like they are swept under the table and it's taboo and we don't talk about babies that died and pregnancy loss because, it's too upsetting for other people as well.
It's so frustrating, like having worked in hospitals here, like, oh, we can't talk about it. I've worked in places where they've said we really shouldn't mention it in antenatal classes. And I'm like, I'm trying to educate people to understand when they should seek help. It's not Voldemort, that it's not like this is going to appear because we say it. That's not how it works. And it gets really frustrating as a midwife because I'm like, we know the numbers, we know the statistics, but we also know ways to combat this. The evidence is irrefutable. It's not like, oh, could be a bit of this, could be a bit of that. It's education and early intervention and the monitoring of anyone with complications. And the fact that we don't talk about loss is really, really sad because that's a person. That was somebody's child, somebody's pregnancy. It's, I think as health professionals, like, how dare we think of it as anything else?
Yeah, it's not about blame or somebody's fault or an institution's fault. It's
not about us at all, really, as the midwives.
It's nothing to do with us. In the sense of that element. And I think, Lala, your point about expecting it to just be here is very valid. A friend of mine had a loss in Manchester and she knew that everything was going to be there and everything was there because why would that's the kind of environment she grew up in and she knew that it would be there. But you wouldn't even think if you were to come here that wouldn't be available, because it just seems like when I came here I was like, well, of course it's available. Oh, it's not. And 12 years later it's still, I mean, there's been improvements, but it's still, there's a very long way to go. And and I think collectively as midwives and professionals, the more we push for it as well, the more likely we are to see changes. And the fact that if we're doing education, we're doing a full day of education for other healthcare professionals, it helps them to raise awareness for them so that they know how to handle these situations when they arise. They know kind of, it's not just you, Nikki, or me going, or Lala saying this needs to happen. It's more than one professional.
Yeah. And I think something else that's a little bit tricky here is because we have, we have a lot. So within our communities, we all work as support workers, right, as well. We're not necessarily affiliated. None of us are working in hospitals as clinicians at the moment. We don't have a lot of signposting in between different clinics and hospitals. And I think what can be tricky with bereavement is that if you've been through a traumatic loss, it may not be that the right place that you want that follow-up care, that essential follow-up care for mental health and well-being, as well as the physical care, in the place that you had the loss. And I think this is where, again, we've got to try and break down those barriers to be able to say, we may not be the right place. We understand if we are not the place that you want to have this follow-up care, but we want to ensure that you have access to it. So we want to know who we can, if there's someone that we can make recommendations and we can share notes to ensure that you have the care that you need. Because I think, we can kind of drop out of the system. And we have so many families in our community who can speak to, of course, the times where they were let down by not receiving the support they should have done. But we've got the families who say that although it was without question the most heartbreaking day of their life, the hardest thing they'll ever go through, they had the most beautifully supported birth or experience, depending on what this experience looked like, what gestation, but the words and the actions of those around them made the world of difference. And that's just massive, being asked to say, right, just as Nikki said, let's take some time, Do you have a birth plan? Do you have a way, what does this look like for you? Do you want to talk through options for comfort management? Do you want to talk through options for, what's important to you? Do you want to have that skin to skin time with your baby afterwards? Do you want to have some time to then kind of process before you consider whether you want to see your baby? All of those things, these are conversations that they come from a point of confidence, right? And I think that's something that we need to, as a community, work towards encouraging, because as we say, the very essence of this conversation is that bereavement care is essential birth care. It's not an if, it's a when it's going to happen. And it's something that, we can empower professionals to be able to support with more confidence.
I think as well, it's always worth remembering that this is not for everyone. Like, we're here because we're passionate about it, right? Like, it's my favorite part of midwifery in the most like somber, horrific way. But I feel like as a midwife, this is where I'm strong and I can help families so much. So for me, I choose to be part of this community. And I know it's not for every midwife. And some people who have had their own loss as health professionals might struggle. But what we, like you kind of said rightly, Lala, is we need to have professionals referring out or just stepping back and going, I'm not the right person to look after this family today. Yeah. Fine. The fact that's us doing our job. That's us knowing what our boundary is and us stepping away and saying someone else needs to come and take care of this, or I don't know enough. Who do I call? The fact that, Lala, you go to births all the time when there's been a loss. I will just go when asked. There's very few times I will not go. And having Love Through Loss there and like options of people coming in that aren't affiliated with any other hospital or clinic, brand, whatever, all these politics that always overshadow maternity care. Having those people, it doesn't make sense that people still go, oh, I didn't know you existed. And I'm like, how did the staff in the hospitals not do this, not make this connection? Like, even as hospital staff, I will Google something. Like it comes up, and it's just about the understanding the gravity of having support like that. That's what we need. That's why we need maternity
having like
education.
A bereavement lead. We in the UK, it's
absolutely
quite we do. You have a bereavement midwife, you have bereavement midwife, you have bereavement lead.
Were so here, but with changing scenery, like workforce wise, it tends to slip, and a lot of the time I find people don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I think this is
it's challenging because it's it again for some people might have been through a loss, they might be navigating something, and it's just not, they can't give the best care.
Absolutely.
Some people just go, I just don't like it, I don't want to. And education, like supporting them with that, giving them the tools and the knowledge, so that, because it's usually about them, it's not about the scenario, it's because they don't know how to handle it. And as professionals, we already deal with a lot of people that don't know what to say or don't know what to do, and then they say things like, oh, at least you found out early, or oh, at least you've got another child, and they always say the wrong thing.
Anything that starts with at least awful, is the wrong thing.
At least, or why don't you just at least or just need to go. But as healthcare professionals, we need to not have that mentality, and to help with that, you need education, you need support, and you need training, so that you can go. It's like anything that you don't know well, it can be scary. If you don't know how to do something, it's a scary thing. There's areas of practice that I've had that I'm like, oh, I don't really want to do this, but it's because I don't feel confident. It's not because of anyone else. And you should, and if people won't acknowledge that themselves, then as managers should say, right, we're going to do this bereavement training for everybody, because everybody should have it, and this is an area that you feel uncomfortable with, so let's support you with that.
I think we need to be able to make our workforce comfortable enough to say, I need help. And I think that is a big issue. And it's a work culture thing that is in certain places and not in others. But saying I don't know what I'm doing, or I need help, that's not something people are readily able to say a lot of the time. And we need to be able to make sure that they can, especially with this, because at the end of the day, it may be difficult for us, but it is not a patch on what the family we're looking after is going through. So, yeah.
And I think that's a big part, you know, for anybody who is watching this, you know, we are putting this training together, and we're very excited to launch it. It has so many parts to it and so many voices that are going to be woven through it that it takes a little while to put it together. And then it will be it'll be a virtual training that is facilitated in person, in that it will have recorded bits from lots of amazing contributors from our community, parent voices woven through it, because they are at the very heart of everything that we are here for. And then professionals speaking to their area of expertise, and included in that things that are so important. For example, I'm the first to say that I came into doing this work very naive and ignorant to the diversity of bereavement traditions and cultures and practices from one part of the world to another. So what might happen in Catholicism in Ireland might be very different to the Philippines, might be very different to South America. So it's so important that we also listen to what that looks like, because then we can understand what might those norms be. So this is part of one of the modules that will be within the training, is hearing and understanding, so that because I think that's the thing that's so fabulous about where we live, is that in that very room, between a mum, a dad, a doctor, a midwife, possibly bereavement doula, you could easily have 6 different nationalities in that very room, 6 different ideas about what end-of-life care looks like, what bereavement traditions are, what burial, cremation, repatriation, all of those sorts of things, none of who were putting any plans in place prior to that, probably 24 hours before. So there's enormous challenges from that point of view, when we don't all understand what might be normal for each other. And then within that, I think something that's so important is then addressing what our own biases are. Just because we might do things or have a certain belief doesn't mean that others share that. Even if we're of the same faith or same culture, what is right for that family in that experience, in that moment, is her decision to make, and it may be very different to what she thought she would have made in advance, and that's okay. And it's also okay that within a family, everyone has differing ways that they want to do things. If a mother wants to hold a baby and a father doesn't, that's okay, or vice versa. You know, we've had grandparents really surprise themselves. In fact, we've got one family who's spoken on previous events and shared their story that, you know, the grandparents themselves went through a stillbirth experience and they didn't see their baby. And then when their grandchild was stillborn, they were able to see and spend time with that baby, and what that meant for them in terms of processing and healing is huge. So I think understanding the different possible traditions and cultures is a massive part of it, because we all need to come to this with cultural awareness and sensitivity of the diversity of our community, but also then addressing what our own biases might be in there, and making sure that we are not imposing those upon others. We are making sure we're giving as much broad spectrum choice and individuality as possible.
I think one of the best parts of like learning through this as like a midwife or a doula, the best people to learn from as well is the family themselves. And it may be the extended family that you're talking to, because mom is not, or dad is not in a position to talk. But when we're kind of going through these like these conversations about what does this care look like for you, like what does this pathway look like for you, we're learning from the family themselves. And actually what I always used to recommend is use your guidelines, just use the back page of the guidelines and actually make a note of what this family have done, because then if you come across this again, you're going to have a better idea, and you're going to start to be able to think, okay, this is what it looks like for these people from this region who are this religion, and just like being quite mindful that we're learning off them every time. And like you say, everything is different from person to person, like Catholicism is different from country to country or whatever. But the family are the best ones to teach us. And I always ask extended family for if they're religious, if there's a religious leader that I can actually talk to on their behalf, because sometimes you don't want to put the family in that position, but they will always have someone. If faith is important to them and that's how they practice, they will have somebody that they can give you a number of that you can reach out to. And like what we learn from that is huge as like bereavement support people.
And this is what we hope to share, isn't it, as well through the training, is having this collection of resources so that in every hospital, there's a really clear pathway to follow in terms of if we need to reach out to, anyone within the faith of the family, whether we need to speak to. And I think a huge part of that, and I hope anyone who's watching this will look at previous years of our recordings with Vivian Albertine on the logistical support, because that is something I think that is very overwhelming and unfamiliar for many, many people. And yet there is an amazing organization here that can take so much stress off families. And again, should be one of the first points of call for most hospitals to be able to give that information. Because we were talking today within the training that we're doing, if you have a baby that passes away in utero or unexpectedly or outside of that hospital environment, then one of the first things that often happens, and again, it's a sort of default, is that there'll be a text message to the father's phone to say that a criminal case has been opened. And it's not necessarily to say that you are under any investigation. It's part of the processing and the way that it happens. But if you do not know that that's coming, that is incredibly confronting, traumatic, at a time where so many parents are already asking themselves, no matter how much reassurance they have from the team around them, what could I have done differently? And it's just so things like that. So making sure that there are really clear pathways to follow and places to reach out to, because we are so much better as a community than we are as individuals. That's how this works, right? We can't be all things to all people, but we can know who to speak to and who to connect families with and who to follow up with. Because I think that's a really big part of birth care being, bereavement care being birth care, is it doesn't end when the baby's born. It's all through that postpartum. It is lactation support for milk suppression, all of those things. It's the healing. It's understanding that your body goes through postpartum recovery and what that looks like and what that entails, because it is so important that we have that and have that person, that phone number that that you can call and speak to labor ward, and you can they will understand that you are not at home with a living baby, but to be able to guide you through the postpartum experience that you're navigating.
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's that we have to get the message across that not everybody leaves hospital with a baby that is living.
Yeah.
And I think that is, and thankfully our job is, they're the fewer times, but to the people that happen to, they're all consuming, rightly so. So I think reminding people that just because these families don't have a living baby, it doesn't mean that they don't need midwifery care, maternity care. It's kind of, people forget, you go onto the postnatal ward, then you go home and that's it, done, like bye.
And having access to that from the moment that they know that they've lost this baby, having access to those choices of who they would like to support them and what is out there and who can I speak to and do I want to. It doesn't matter if they never ring us because they've chosen another path because they had choices. But what we come back to, and what I hear every single time I divert somebody to this community, I wish I'd known about you sooner. I wish somebody told me sooner that you were there, that this person was there, that I could have, from the moment that it happens, people need to be aware of the support that is available to them. And that starts generally with midwifery care and nursing care and obstetricians. This starts from there, because and again, it being a professional in that capacity and going, oh, I don't know what to do now because I work in here in the hospital and I can't support you out there, but I know someone that can. That's how this works. This is a multidisciplinary team approach, and I get excited by multidisciplinary teams. I'm a geek like that. But
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
that's where it begins.
it does.
It's almost like when it happens, we want, you know, it should be, this has been diagnosed, this has just happened. This is where you need to go for support, whether it's a text, whether it's we come in and we support these women and their families. But what is that there's not enough emphasis on external support, like you say, outside of these institutions, because referring between services is not great here. There's a lot of kind of like keeping everything to themselves. But what I find with bereavement support, and a lot of feedback always says this, is that they didn't know that's what they needed until they had it. And a lot of people, it's similar like the memories. Oh, no, I don't want that yet. But actually, I've never heard anybody, correct me, you might ask, anybody say, oh, I regret choosing that doula, that midwife to support me through all of this. I've never, ever heard that. It's almost like something you didn't know you needed.
Absolutely. Or never heard anyone say, I wish I'd never made memories. I wish I hadn't taken those footprints.
Never heard it.
Seen my baby, ever.
Yeah.
I've heard the opposite though, which
Always
is heartbreaking.
yeah.
And I think that the big takeaway message is that in the interim, you know, we are helping, or we wish to help. We are here as a community to try and help improve bereavement care as essential birth care in every hospital setting. But when that is still feeling lacking in confidence, perhaps isn't as established as we all wish it to be, because I don't think this is ever through anyone's...
It will be.
It will be. It will be. But in the interim,
we're on it.
We are here. Please use us as a community. Please refer to, please signpost to, and we can help pick up and support that family and get them, give them options and give them choices and give them care. And I think what's really important to remember is, obviously we've talked about this in terms of birth care, and birth is something that happens whether you are, you know, a 6-week gestation, where you are TFMR and you are traveling overseas, whether you are going through stillbirth, late stage miscarriage, it is you going through birth of some sort. And I think there are so many potentials to slip through the net of having really good, confident and continuous support, especially where it might be disjointed because it's an earlier pregnancy loss, perhaps supported through a fertility clinic. It hasn't come into midwifery care yet. Maybe it's TFMR, you've been guided to overseas for support and for treatment and for the birth of your baby. And this is where I think we have to really make sure that signposting is taking place, so that people do not just drop out of the system, but they have somewhere to go. They have a family, a community of other families to be able to kind of offer that validation in terms of their part in this world as parents, and be able to really then support. And we will be talking later on about the importance of peer support for the professionals who are supporting those families, because within bereavement care being essential birth care, so too is the well-being of the professionals who are supporting them. So I hope that you will join us later on for that session. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.